All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is a Friday, so it's a Friday free-for-all. I'm not calling it a free-for-all. I got that image there of Thom Hartmann with the nerve, the chutzpah to call Jill Stein a grifter. That's really a laugh riot. And I know it's a little ambiguous. I was looking at this. People might think, oh, you agree with Hartmann that Stein's a grifter. Of course I don't. Of course I recognize that she's actually the one candidate running who is truly acting out of selfless motives, who's taking on a remarkable challenge, didn't even want to do it. She only is running because Cornel West decided for whatever reason he didn't want to run as a Green, which was a terrible, terrible mistake and betrayal of our movement. Pro-people movement, pro-environment movement, pro-peace movement, pro-worker movement. Dr. West betrayed all of that. And so, you know, Dr. Stein had really no choice, Jill, but to step in. And Hartmann has, you know, the remarkable blindness, hypocrisy to call Stein the grifter. This is after Harris tells, is it what, The View? There's not a thing I would have done differently. She was asked specifically, is there anything, you know? And I like it that she does even these softball interviews with fangirls like The View and what's her name? Rule, right? Isn't that her name? Stephanie Rule. They actually ask a few good questions and you learn from it. So better softball interviews than no interviews. It's extraordinary. This candidate the Democrats anointed, again, there was no nominating process. Somebody that Obama even reportedly didn't think she should have just been given the nomination. Reportedly, he felt there should have been some kind of process to identify whom the Democratic registered voters preferred. That didn't happen, right? There was a decision by the donor class, by the Democratic elites in Congress, that Harris, represented what they want. And that's what they got. And now, Thom Hartmann, for whatever reason, totally, and I mean, he gives some, they don't make any sense to me, takes the position that somehow we shouldn't challenge. We don't have a right to run a candidate who actually, embodies our values. And I think he's doing this. I really believe it's, he's the grifter because there's a lot of pressure, right? And you'll get a lot of clicks. He'll get a lot of likes for that post. No question. It's getting a lot of attention. I'm giving it attention. I really don't want to. I appreciate those who brought to my attention. I never read Hartmann. I know a lot of people really do. You really find him to be somewhat persuasive or interesting. And I don't want to be too hard on the guy because, to be fair, I do want to be that hard on him. I get it. He does have a little bit of goodwill in my book because he wrote The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight. And he explained to me in a way that I really could understand, I believe. I believe he's right. I think he's right. It made sense. Why fossil fuels, coal, gas, petroleum are so rich in calories, why there's so much energy in them. And he did a real good job with that. So thank you, Thom, for that, right? But you use your capital in such a terrible way. And everyone's citing you like somehow what you have to say is some kind of gospel, which I find extraordinarily frustrating. You really have demonstrated over time that you're a liberal Democratic shill. Yes, you supported Bernie, I give you that, but I remember you going on Stephanie Miller's program in early 2016 during the primaries, and you were so weak. She was just aggressively attacking Bernie, flacking for Hillary, and you were mealy-mouthed. I mean, you defended Bernie a little, but really not nearly as strongly as you should have. And unlike Miller, who nastily and dishonestly attacked Bernie, you didn't make any of the really legitimate points that you should have made to take down that corporate crook, Clinton. So you've really lost me completely. What you said, I remember, I've told the story before, you never put me on your program when I would call in. You knew it was me. You refused to put me on. And I still will never forget Robert Reich saying that Clinton would be a great president with zero evidence to back it, no support for that statement. You just nodded along, didn't ask him to bolster it, to provide evidence. And obviously, we know she would have been a terrible president. All right, let's get to the news. We're going to get right back to Hartman, I promise, and some other stories that kind of grab my attention. More commentary. It is a free-for-all, so I'm kind of responding to you and to others rather than the news story stuff, which I generally do the rest of the week. But I will obviously, if there's a big breaking news story, we'll provide it. Yeah, with regard to the hurricane, the latest Milton, I think there's 12 deaths now. So it's, a small fraction of the hundreds that we saw in the wake of the Helene hurricane down there in North Carolina. I don't know. Of course, the numbers will continue to climb a little bit, and it's a terrible disaster. I don't mean to minimize it, but Florida was spared to a degree that North Carolina wasn't. Apparently, somebody said, was it Axelrod? I don't have the story, but he apparently made some comment how this could help. Like, I guess he was serious. He was pleased. He said this could help Harris because rich Floridians who are supporting her will make sure they get their vote in, whereas the poor working class and, lower middle class Floridians who are more likely to support Trump may not have an opportunity to vote. So I guess Axelrod was happy about that. I heard that somewhere. I don't know how true that is, but it wouldn't surprise me. And I don't think he probably didn't say it in a gloating manner the way the way, say, a Carville would have. Axelrod's got a little bit of class. So just real quick, we always center Gaza on this program, the greatest example of just horrific genocidal colonialism. It really is. I mean, Israel's clearly trying to turn Gaza into a colony, and the West Bank as well, and now Lebanon, looking for Lebensraum in Lebanon. That is what our closest ally Israel is doing, completely backed by the Harris-Biden administration. So 61 killed. It says 60 there in the Palestine Chronicle. 61 if you read the article. 61 killed in 24 hours. Jabalia remains under siege in Gaza. It is horrific. It is absolutely, without question, genocide. I'll get into a little bit more details a little bit as we move forward. Here's an image. You just see the coffins everywhere in Gaza. Courtesy of Harris-Biden. And that's who Tom Hartman insists you have to vote for. That's the kind of person he is. Somebody, Kamala Harris, who shares none of his progressive values, at least the ones he espouses. Don't know if he really believes in them. I'm going to guess he doesn't. But somehow you have to vote for her. And if you challenge her, if someone challenges her, then they're the grifter. Amazing. Isn't that amazing? This guy uses his platform all the time to talk about how we got to move to the left. We need to redistribute wealth. We need tariffs. One of his biggest issues has always been tariffs. He even talked about tariffs this year. And his candidate, Harris, calls tariffs a sales tax. That's completely false. That's a misrepresentation of what tariffs are. He knows that. Trump supports tariffs, which is one of his pet policies, right? Trump's pet policy is tariffs. Hartman's pet policy is tariffs. And yet, Hartman completely washes his hands of Trump in every respect and attacks, slams, slanders, slurs Jill Stein because he claims she's trying to help the guy who, at least when it comes to tariffs, and I'm going to guess maybe Ukraine also, Hartman shares the same views. Okay, Hartman wants you to vote for Harris, who, along with Joe Biden, has killed, using as their proxy, using as their cat's paw, Bibi Netanyahu, over 42,000 Gazans. And the numbers are shifted a little bit. I had 41,090 yesterday. We have 61 reported dead yesterday, 61 genocide victims yesterday. So I do the math. It should be 150 or so, but I guess they had to refigure the numbers. I'm not really clear, but this is the number that I have now from the Palestine Chronicle. And they are using the numbers from the Palestinian Health Ministry. So there may have been something reported incorrectly, or there may be today. I don't know. And that 61 is yesterday. Another 21 were reported dead when I last checked this morning from Gaza. That's the candidate, Kamala Harris, unwavering support for Israel, that Tom Hartman feels if you even try to challenge her from the left, you're a grifter. That's what he calls them. Extraordinary. So what Israel is doing, and we talked about this yesterday at length because it was so horrible, so atrocious. By the way, Hartman doesn't mention this. You'd think he might have mentioned. He pays a little bit of lip service. We'll get to his truly, I guess dishonest is fair. His dishonest attack, his grift, if you will, on Jill Stein for taking on Kamala Harris. We'll get there. But I talked about yesterday it's so reminiscent what Israel's doing of the Nazis, putting bullets. I don't even know if I guess they put bullets in the heads of children at Babi Yar and other death pits in Russia when they invaded in Ukraine. I don't believe it. What I read is that one of the reasons, more Jews were actually killed during the Holocaust by firing, by the death squads. They call them Einsatzgruppen, I believe, who were part of sometimes the actual Wehrmacht, the army actually helped out. The army tries to claim, the German army claimed in the aftermath, the German generals tried to promoted the myth of the Wehrmacht that it wasn't complicit in genocide. That wasn't true. The SS squads would sometimes recruit army units to help them out when they were killing Jews. But what they found is that it was really, really bad for morale, that the soldiers they might do it. If they did it, they would have bad dreams. They would feel guilty. Some of them would go crazy. It was very expensive. They had to use, a lot of bullets to kill Jews, right? I mean, at least one per person, often more than that. So they went with the death camps, the gas chambers, and Auschwitz and other camps, because it was hurting the German army, the German military, when they would put bullets in the heads of the Jews. Well, now Israel is putting bullets in the heads of Gazan children and chess, one per victim. That's what we discussed yesterday. That's what the New York Times reported. Today's example of Israeli genocide, relentless Israeli attacks on Gaza medical workers. This is a war crime, according to the UN panel. I don't know how there could be any doubt about that. Even the Nazis, as far as I know, didn't shoot Red Cross. right? Every now and then, some Red Cross unit would go out to a concentration camp. I don't know if they let them in the death camps. There was one, Theresienstadt, that was like the model camp. Supposedly it wasn't as bad as the others. So they would go in there sometimes. As far as I know, the Nazis didn't shoot Red Cross workers the way the Israelis are killing Red Crescent workers and other medical workers. I love the New York Times. I love the way they kind of soft pedal, right? Because the New York Times is all in for this. Doesn't have the force of law. Love that. The report, which doesn't have the force of law, found that the military had engaged in deliberate assaults on hospitals and other healthcare providers. Duh. Haven't we been story after story. We see the hospitals in ruins. Here's an example. Here's one of them. So I love, though, the Times says it doesn't have the force of law. Okay, well, so you're saying maybe it's okay to blow up hospitals? We all know they're doing it. You got the image right here. We can all see it, right? This is what Israel's doing. Now, maybe it's not a war crime because that UN report says it doesn't have the force of law, according to the Times. So what? It's still horrible. It's still wrong. It's still evil. It's still diabolical. It's still Nazi. And guess what? Harris Biden supports it. How can you vote for that? And worse than voting for this is when you attack people who say, no, I can't do it. I won't do it. It's too evil. They're too wrong. There are limits. There's only so much I can stomach. I don't think W, one of the worst presidents we've ever seen, I doubt he would have countenanced this. Could be wrong. I don't think he would have gone along with this. We know Reagan told Israel, you can't go into Lebanon. We're back in 82. Can't go into Lebanon. Not going to support that. And Israel didn't. Now, it was a different time. The PACs, I don't know if they even existed. Certainly, AIPAC was influential, whatever it was called back then, but it wasn't as powerful. The pro-Israel lobby was certainly influential, powerful, not the kind of influence it has now over both parties. All right, let's go. Now, let me just show. So Hartman, I'm just going to show this real quick on the screen, but I'm going to move to the view first because I really want to get the interview that they did. I wanted just a few clips from the interview that they did. And again, I'm not going to fault the View. I thought the way they're all just like gushing over killer Kamala Fracker Harris is pretty horrible, but I thought they did their job. I mean, there were some good questions, or one or two, but here's Hartman again. He is in high dudgeon. He is just apoplectic. How dare anyone try to stop Kamala Harris? How dare anyone stand in Kamala Harris's way? That is Hartman's take, right? So let's hear from this exemplar of democracy, this wonderful freedom ally, this democracy ally that Hartman is so besotted by. Let's just hear a little bit of this clip. I'm going to play all of it. I don't have time for that. And you know what? Basically, I'm not even going to show you all Hartman's article because I started to get sick. I really, we're living in times that are really, really distressing. They're awful. And the U.S. is complicit in the worst crime people are capable of, really. And the pressure to vote for a genocider is so strong. But you don't have to fall for it. You don't have to accept that. And yet, you do. This is heartbreaking to me. Absolutely heartbreaking.
Well, if anything, would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had.
I'm going to stop it there. So she says, and I'll play a little more of it because I think the context is fair. And Kulinski actually brought this to my attention. He stopped it right there, and he criticized her for that. But of course, he's all in for Harris. So he played some other clips at other points where she was gave answers he liked. But Kulinski stopped it right there, and he was critical of it. Well, it's a terrible answer. You have to distinguish yourself from the Biden-Harris administration. And to say on The View, this was, I believe, the 10th yesterday. I believe it was yesterday. Maybe it was that. At a time when we just learned, right, there's just more. Israel denies humanitarian aid workers entry into Gaza. Israel shoots children in the head and chest. Israel expands its war theater into Lebanon. Just Israel alone. We're not talking about the disaster that Ukraine has become. The disastrous policies that the U.S. pursued that led to where we are now in Ukraine. And then there's, of course, our domestic policies that have been very, very harmful in many ways, right? Stopping the railway workers from striking, preventing a strike, right? More homeless, record numbers of homeless people now. She can't think of one thing she would do differently. Wow. That's who Tom Hartman thinks you have to vote for.
Yeah.
The work that we have done, for example, capping the cost of insulin at $35 a month for our seniors is something I care deeply about allowing.
So that's good, but Trump actually had started us down that road. This is one of the things the Democrats, I guess, are good at. Seems to work. They come up with a few little areas where they kind of make a bit of a difference, right? And it's not that it isn't meaningful. Of course it is. Reducing healthcare expenses in any way is good, but it's clearly not good enough. That money is, we're still paying as a society for two private ghouls whose profits come from denying us care. And we're paying that out of our tax money, or many of us are paying for it out of our savings, bankrupting ourselves. And she's not for Medicare. She's made it clear. She's not for the one policy that makes all the sense in the world. She's against that. But the Democrats provide just a tiny little bit of cushion on occasion from the sharpest edges of unfettered, unrestrained capitalism, crony capitalism. They provide just the slightest little cushion for some of us. And that is used as an argument to vote for them. I won't fall for it. You want to fall for it? Fall for it.
Here to negotiate drug prices.
Yes.
And bring the cost of prescription medication down for seniors, but my intention is to expand that for all Americans. Mm-hmm. The work we have done to invest in American industries, whether it be in terms of manufacturing and creating almost 800,000 new jobs around manufacturing, those were all a shared priority.
All right, so I don't know what they did to create more manufacturing jobs except for, well, there are a couple things. So I shouldn't say that. That's not fair. Yes, Biden did even add to the Trump tariffs. That certainly helped. But the Build Back Better, I believe, was that there was the bipartisan infrastructure. So I think the Infrastructure Act, yes. So again, the Democrats do a few good things. Now, of course, they greatly added to the debt. They didn't raise the taxes nearly as much as they should have on the wealthy. But again, there's a few little areas where I'm going to say, okay, better than Republicans. But it's not nearly enough. For every half step forward, you take us 2 steps back. I'm not going to fall for it. And I've given you the examples over and over and over of all the horrible ways Democrats have made things worse, both at home and around the world. Okay, let me play another clip because I'm really trying to be fair. I really do. You know, people don't think I try to be fair. You know why I try to be fair? I'll tell you why. Because I don't think I can be persuasive if I lied, if I cut, if I edit, if I parse. I don't persuade myself, let alone anyone else when I do that crap. So I don't. But I do want to hear from you. It is the free-for-all, 240-242. There you go, 240-242-5646. And don't forget, click subscribe. Don't forget, click subscribe. And join me. If you're not going to call in, put something in the text. I'm actually looking at the text right now. I'm actually doing that. All right, let's go back to The View, somewhere. I thought her answer was okay here, actually.
There are so many people in our country who are right in the middle. They're taking care of their kids and they're taking care of their aging parents. Mm-hmm. And it's just almost impossible to do it all, especially if they work. We're finding that so many are then having to leave their job, which means losing a source of income. Yeah. Not to mention the emotional stress. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so what I am proposing is that basically what we will do is allow Medicare to cover in-home health care.
Oh. Fine. Right.
All right, so that's good. I mean, that's really good. It took her a while to get to that answer, but I agree with that. Yes, in-home care for your children, for your senior adult in your life, that should be covered. Of course it should be. Now, it might be, it might not be for seniors. You know, a lot of stuff, Medicare doesn't cover everything. We're talking to Chuck about that. So expanding these government programs is good. And yes, Democrats are much more likely to expand them and much less likely to cut them back than Republicans. Is it enough? They do just enough. They give you just a little taste of sugar. But they take so much away as well, which includes these massive deficit spending debts, right? They'll pay for stuff, but they won't force the billionaire class to actually front the money. So in the end, we all will have to pay for it. The Democratic policies are in some areas less bad than the Republican, but on balance, they're destructive, they're wrong, they're harmful. They are not making life better for us, and they're making things much, much worse around the world. Tom Hartman obviously, well, I don't know if he disagrees or not. I think he actually does agree. If you listen to his program, he's very critical. But as critical as he is of the Democrats, as critical as he is of the establishment, the elites, has some pretty, you know, he wants Medicare for all. He supported Bernie. But he, for whatever reason, has decided he has to go all in against Jill Stein. He says one woman's ego is endangering democracy. So one thing, if you ever met Jill Stein, she has no ego. She's incredibly selfless. In fact, I think that's part of the problem. You heard from Chuck on Wednesday saying she's not a great leader. You know, people who are great leaders have big egos. They think a lot of themselves. They're pretty sure they know what's best. And they're able to convince others to follow them. Jill's much more soft-spoken. That's not who she is. She has no ego. She didn't even want to run. So right off the bat, Hartman gets it wrong. Now, he calls her a grifter. She's not getting rich off of this. She's not making any money. She doesn't have the billion-dollar donors that Harris has, that Trump has. You know who's the grifting? Tom's. This was amazing. I wanted to comment. This is on Substack. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. I hope you get the irony of this. So I tried to post. This guy, Hartman's calling Stein a grifter. I tried to comment on his article. And this is what pops up. Only paid subscribers. I got to pay Tom Hartman for the privilege of criticizing him for calling Jill Stein a grifter. Quite astonishing. Talk about a grift. This is the world's biggest grift. And we see this more than anything. Progressive groups, like the one I formerly was associated with, Our Evolution. I see this with the environmental groups that, going out there, busting a hump for Kamala. It's fundraising. Every email you get, help us canvass in Pennsylvania. Send us money. We're fighting to preserve democracy from MAGA. Send us money. It's all a grift. So I want to delve into this article by Hartman. By the way, again, free for all, please call. We got to have a conversation about this. I know a lot of you don't agree with me here. Tell me why you think I'm wrong. I'll listen. You just have to listen to me too. So from Hartman, as her Wisconsin campaign manager, Pete Karras, I guess that's Jill Stein's manager, said, we need to teach Democrats a lesson. Okay, I wouldn't probably phrase it like that, but okay. So, if I was Karras, I don't think that was a very well chosen sentence, well phrased sentence. And Hartman's response to we need to teach Democrats a lesson, arguably, Democrats have already learned that lesson. So Hartman takes the lesson Democrats need to campaign in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, which Hillary didn't do, right? She didn't go to Michigan at all and was barely in Wisconsin, went to Philly to raise money. That was about it when she was in Pennsylvania. So Hartman's saying, okay, lesson learned. You don't need to teach it. We get it. You don't need to run to teach us a lesson because we understand we need to campaign in those Great Lakes states. What a load of crap. That's not the lesson, you moron. That's not the lesson. The lesson is that working class people have very different priorities. And what they care about is peace and jobs. And if you want to win, and since those are really good things, right? Peace and good jobs are good things. Democrats should be fighting for peace and good jobs. So I wrote this back in August. This is the lesson, by the way. You want a lesson? This is the lesson. The third lesson you can get, is that don't nominate a fundamentally dishonest, self-dealing, completely clueless in terms of her own, weaknesses candidate. But we'll leave that out, right? Well, maybe we won't. But the two policy lessons that came out of the 2016 loss by the Democrats at Trump, the two policy lessons that came out of that were that working people in the Midwest, in the heartland, call it whatever you want. This was in my piece, Democratic Opportunity. And I don't just say it like pull stuff out of my butt. I provide you with the reasons for it. Studies from professors, a study from University of Minnesota and Boston University said that she lost because she was pro-war. She had been pro-Iraq war. She never really acknowledged how wrong she had been. She was always a hawk. She supported the coup in Honduras when she was president. She gloated, we came, we saw, he died when it came to Gaddafi in Libya. She lost voters that Obama had won in those important states. At a very high level, if they were service families. And there's much more in my piece, but basically families with relatives who were serving multiple tours of duty voted disproportionately for Trump. A very significant number of military families in the purple states voted for Trump because of fatigue from Clinton wars. have we seen any candidate any more hawkish than Kamala? I sure haven't. Brags about putting together the coalition that's fighting this disastrous war in Ukraine rather than pushing for peace there. Says she's always going to support Israel no matter what. Unwavering. Was, picking fights with Iran at the DNC. So hawkishness doesn't play in those states. Sorry, Tom. The other big factor in those manufacturing states was free trade. And several sources, and again, I don't go into all of them, but I point out that deep dives into the voting demographics in those states found that because Trump said he was going to impose tariffs because he was against the TPP from the beginning, unlike Clinton, who only grudgingly came out against it at the end, decided those families, those working class blue collar families, recognizing how, quote, free, unquote, trade had destroyed their lives. The neoliberalism that Tom is always decrying, always criticizing, Hartman himself. Those voters, the victims of neoliberalism, voted for Trump. That's the lesson. That's the lesson from 2016 that Democrats completely didn't get. Harris campaigning as a free trader. Remember, she mocks tariffs as a sales tax. Amazing. And Hartman claims, doesn't, that somehow the Democrats learned their lesson. No, they didn't, Tom. No, they didn't learn it. Now, what about the issue of hawkishness, right? So let's just revisit that for just a moment. How terribly the pro-war positions of the Democrats have hurt them electorally. Now, putting aside how immoral they are, how they've destroyed our nation's soul, Hartman does pay lip service to this. He says, well, those slim margins that Trump won by might become much bigger. In other words, Trump might win by more because of Stein is pushing hard against Biden's. And I look at the phraseology, unfortunate support. How about immoral? How about wrongful? How about genocidal support of Israel's brutal bombing campaign? Okay, Tom, yes, brutal is true, but it's worse. It's much, much worse. It's a part of the eradication of Gaza, erasing them from the map. But he diminishes it. He minimizes it. He refuses to acknowledge just how wrong the Harris-Biden, and he only says, and let me go back to that for a sec. Let me just quickly show that. Biden's unfortunate support. Wait a second. It's not Biden. It's Harris-Biden support. What did Harris say to the View women? I can't think of a thing I do differently. There's not a thing. There's not a thing. And he's calling it Biden's unfortunate support. What a phony. Are you falling for this? 240-242-5646. So Hartman is all upset at, he doesn't want to blame the voters, right? He doesn't want to say, well, it's the Muslims' fault for refusing to support the candidate who backs their genocide. He doesn't want to say that. So he says, President Biden's unfortunate support for Israel. But the Muslims, the Palestinians in Michigan, Wisconsin, other swing states, they're not falling for this crap, the manure that Hartman is shoveling. They're supporting Stein. So are they misguided, Tom? Do they not understand just how bad the Biden unfortunate support for Israel is? Or maybe they really do understand that it's Harris, too. You'd think, but why doesn't, talk about a grift, why doesn't he call on Harris to change her policy? Why doesn't he say, Kamala, guess what? It's really unfortunate that Joe Biden is supporting genocide, although we aren't going to call it genocide. It's really unfortunate, but maybe you should back away from those policies a little bit. Maybe that would help you. Look at those numbers. 40% of Muslims prefer Stein. Maybe you should reconsider your policies. Why doesn't Hartman say that? Because that's not what the Democratic Party wants him to say. That's why. That's what we call a grift. That's what we call trying to get money from your readers, trying to get more eyeballs, more clicks, while taking a position that's completely antithetical to what you actually have said over the years because you're pandering to your audience. That's the grift. It's disgraceful, it's despicable, it's disgusting, it's loath. So again, more numbers that completely bolster the argument that Hartman, instead of going after Stein, should be telling Harris, you got to change your policies, which are horrible. Not just change them to get votes, but change them because they're bad, they're wrong, they're evil. Somehow, according to Hartman, I guess, it's Jill Stein's fault that Muslims don't want to vote for Kamala. That's, according to Tom Hartman, that's her fault. It's really extraordinary. Now, I want to get to the nasty insult. And again, just real quick. So you'd think if Hartman really cared about electing Harris, if he really thought it was that important, wouldn't he call on her to change her policies? Wouldn't he say to her, it's just not working for you to be all in for the genocide? Wouldn't that be the right move for him to do? I can't see anything but doing that if you really, really cared. Well, first of all, I care about humanity, but if you cared about electing your candidate. Hartman does believe, I guess, that the voters who are now embracing Stein, the Muslim voters, are being suckered. They're being made fools of. They're by Stein. But he presents no evidence of that. And in fact, the evidence goes just the other way. I'll get to the insult he provides. But here he does insult her again. Let me just show this as well. I want to put this up because I think it's, again, so instructive about the way Hartman dishonestly, sleazily, he really hits bottom. I mean, I was never to be honest with you, never a huge Hartman fan. Never got why people liked him better than Ed. I always thought Ed Schultz, Big Ed, he was much better, much more authentic, more interesting to listen to, better voice. But whatever. I know a lot of people preferred Hartman for whatever. So here, Hartman, in his piece, calling Stein a grifter, she's bragging, he says, about handing the election to Trump. That's false. She never says that. She never claims. There's nothing. He doesn't provide any quotes. I've listened to pretty much everything Stein said. She never says that. It is true. I played it yesterday. Kshama Sawant said we have a chance to deny Michigan to Harris. But that's not what Harris has ever said. We'll hear from her on Mehdi Hasan in a little bit. But she didn't. So he's just lying there. But what Harris has, or what Stein has said, and what her running mate, Dr. Ware, has said is, based on the third way polling, Muslims aren't going to vote for Harris. They just aren't. It's not going to happen. So she's going to lose, period. I want them to vote for me. I'm not taking voters from her because they weren't going to vote for her. They're not going to vote for her unless she gives up on her genocide, which is what Hartman should be calling for. He should be saying to her, look, you want those voters? Come out strongly against Israel. Call for an immediate cessation of all arms shipments to Israel. this point is very, very, very important. The point is that the polling that Stein cites and that Hartman presumably accepts say these voters aren't voting for Harris. It's not that they are saying to themselves, well, Harris is okay. We'd probably vote for her if it weren't for Jill Stein. But since Stein's running, we're going to vote for her. That's not what they're saying. The third way is very, very clear. They're not going to vote for her, period. End of story. No more. That's it. So Stein is saying, okay, here's an opportunity for me because my policies are much, much, much better than Kamala's to fill that void, to take those votes that are up for grabs because they ain't voting for Kamala. In a way, you could make an argument that she's helping Harris because if they're not going to vote for her anyway because she supports genocide, which she does, maybe some of them would vote for Trump, no matter how crazy you think that sounds, the polling doesn't refute that theory. It doesn't refute that theory. Let me show you where I got that from. There was some numbers there. Let me see if I got them. I had them up before. Here we go. So in Michigan, 40% of Muslim voters, according to the CARE study, say they'll support Stein. 12% say they'll vote for Harris. And 18% are going to vote for Trump. So those 40% have already said, we're not voting for Stein. We're not voting for Harris, period. She's not getting our vote. Some of those might be gravitating to Trump for all we know. You could make an argument. I'm not saying I make this argument. I don't make this argument. But based on these numbers, if your theory is that the only thing that matters is Harris, we have to elect her, we have to defeat Trump no matter what, then you could make, based on these numbers, a fair claim that Jill Stein is actually helping Kamala Harris because she's lost Muslim voters, some of whom are gravitating to Trump. If she takes those voters from Trump, that actually helps Harris. Hartman gets it completely wrong in every respect. He's really a piece of, he's a real piece of work, isn't he? He's real. And let me just end my segment on him. This really turned my stomach from Hartman. I moderated the 2012 debate between Stein and Gary Johnson. And they said, she had the smell of a cheap political hustler. Again, there's nothing about Jill Stein that comes across as anything but truly authentic. I agree with Chuck. She's not real charismatic. To me, she's a leader because I agree with her policies. And, as long as I agree with her policies, I'll follow her. As soon as I stop agreeing with them, I'll stop following her. That's true for Tom Hartman, too. If Tom Hartman came out with an article saying how great Jill Stein was, I would say, oh, this is a really good article. Read it. To me, I don't look at names. I don't care whoever it is. If you make a good argument, I support you. I agree with you. If you make a bad one, I don't. That's all. It couldn't be clearer that Hartman's arguments are awful. And for him to say she is a cheap political hustler, complete nonsense. Couldn't be farther from the truth. I saw a guy posting on Facebook saying, oh, she's getting money from the Russians. What are you talking about? There may be some support for her because Russia wants this endless war with Ukraine to end, just as I do, just as most of the rest of the world does. Come on. Come up with some good arguments. All right, this is from the Majority Report. I don't like the Majority Report. I never liked the Majority. I don't like Sam Cedar. I don't like his voice. I don't like his snark, his snarl. I don't the way he talks. I don't like anything about the Majority Report. And I don't like Emma Vigeland. But as much as I dislike them, I don't dislike them as much as I dislike Tom Harmon. And I'll tell you why. Because at least Cedar has been consistently critical of, harshly critical of the White House's policy with respect to Israel, to its full-on support for Israel. So, yeah, I give you credit for that, Cedar. I really do. There was someone he was going after, kind of a center-left person, that he went after for being too pro. I guess was it Bill Maher? I can't remember. And I was like, yeah, all right, Cedar, because this issue is so important to me. And again, I don't really bear grudges to a great degree. If you're with me on an issue, I'm with you on that issue. Even if you were against me on a lot of other issues. But here, I thought I would post this. Emma Vigeland from the Majority Report there says she's enraged that people aren't convinced Democrats are the lesser of two evils. The reality is that we have two choices for president, either deal with it or don't. Okay, well, the reality is those are two really bad choices. The two people that you say we have to choose from are both really bad. You can be enraged at me, but I don't believe the Democrats are the lesser of two evils. Or to the extent that they're lesser evil, they're not much less evil. They're just a little tiny bit less evil. I'm not sure where Cedar comes down on that. I assume he's pretty much on the same page as Vigeland, but she's been more of an apologist for the Democrats. So yeah, you can be enraged, but what's your evidence? I guess on choice? Yeah, I mean, those are important issues, right? There's some areas where the Democrats really are better. But in the end, when we're facing ecocide, we're in an ecocide right now. We're living through ecocide. When the Harris-Biden administration is actively supporting genocide. The Harris-Biden administration is actively supporting an incredibly harmful, destructive war with Russia. And the Harris-Biden administration is also promoting a vision of neoliberalism that in some ways is even uglier and worse than Trump's. So yeah, you want to say they're less evil? Fine, be my guest. But what's your evidence for that? I know, you can point at some issues, choice, reproductive rights. Yeah, some areas, okay. I'll acknowledge it. I don't think that outweighs all the horrors in this time that we're seeing as a direct result of Democratic policies. And I'm not saying you should vote for Trump. I don't think you should. You shouldn't vote for him either. They're both bad. Democrats don't make up for it. They don't make up enough ground from the areas where they're really off. Okay, couple more thoughts. By the way, join me, 240-242-5646. I saw this on Facebook. I saw this question. Thought I would just respond to it. And then I'm going to get to back and forth I had with one of my best commenters, since it is the free-for-all, so everyone's voice gets to be heard. I thought this was a very interesting post, actually. And I don't know how true it is, but I assume it's true. I know birth rates have been dropping, and they're below 2 in most of the developed world. So, by the way, let me just close that up a little bit for you. You can sort of, well, I don't. So what is the best simple explanation for why no one in the developed world is having kids? I'm going to answer it first, my answer. Because the future is unremittingly bleak. Because we are living in time of ecocide. Because our government is truly soulless and amoral and has made common cause with the corporations and the military suppliers that are destroying our planet. That's why. People know that things are getting worse and worse. There's no real hope. And that's why, they're not having kids. Right? That's why. And then the poster writes, at 27, my granddad had 0 qualifications, a house, a wife, and 3 kids on a sergeant's salary. So yeah, things were better. Things were fairer. There was less economic injustice than there is now. And then the poster writes, at 27, I just finished postgrad pro qualifications and share a 2-bed flat with 2 friends. I lose 65% of my income to taxes and rent, and I have 10 square feet personal space. So I feel for you, man. I really do. It's awful. And I don't have a good answer except vote for Jill Stein, because it ain't going to get better if Kamala's the president. I will note and when I first read this, I read it quickly. I said, I lose 65% of my income to taxes and rent. Well, I was like, okay, the taxes part, you may be exaggerating a little bit, but not when you throw in the rent, because the rent could be 40, 50%, right? Easy of your income. But people do complain. A lot of working class people complain that taxes are too high. And I'm always like, or I've in the past been somewhat unsympathetic, because I've always taken the view in the past, well, taxes are the price we pay for a civilized society. And I still believe that. But we don't live in a civilized society. And people are still having to pay high taxes. And where are those taxes going to? Not as high as in Europe. Where are those taxes going to? They're not going to make sure they have health care. They're not going to make sure that there's always a true security blanket, decent, safe shelter, retirement, Social Security that really will provide for them in their seniority. No, not at all. That money's going to kill people overseas. That money is going to bullets to be put in the head of Palestinian children. That money is going to missiles being launched into Russia. So yeah, people don't like it. Their taxes going to that crap. And who can blame them? All right. Just a few more minutes left in the free-for-all. 240-242-5646. There was a clip. Okay. So, yeah, I'm not going to play that clip. Towards the end of the program, I don't need to play it. So let me respond, and this will do it for me because we're just about at the full hour. The clip I'm not going to play, just in case anyone was wondering, it was Mehdi Hassan really going hard after Jill Stein. And I thought his question was fair, a little bit fair anyway, where he was asking her how voting for her helped stop the genocide. And she and her running mate, Butch, were to get into it with him. But I'll just respond briefly without playing the clip. I get what Hassan is saying. It doesn't look, you'd have to be kind of deluded to think she's really got a real chance to win. So since either Harris or Trump will win, almost certainly, and both are committed to the genocide in Gaza by Israel, voting for Stein ain't going to stop it, at least not right away. But what other options do we have? I mean, Hassan's view is so completely nihilistic. Hassan is saying, well, I'm going to vote for you. You're not going to win, so it doesn't matter. I guess he would say, well, I'm going to help Trump win, but it doesn't matter in terms of the genocide if that's your goal, because both candidates are clearly all in for it. So if you take the position that Hassan takes, which is, well, voting for you isn't going to change anything, that's nihilism. Then come up, there's nothing we can do. It's all over. And maybe he's right. I'm not saying he's wrong about that. But at least let's try. At least we got a 100 chance. We vote for, enough people vote for Stein. Maybe, just maybe, some of the timid, weak, feckless, so-called progressives in the Democratic Party say, this is why we're losing races. We've got to take a different position. Maybe some of them actually even become green. Wouldn't that be nice? We can't keep doing what we're doing now. Maybe we can do something else that would work. All right. Final. I'm going to put this whole screen because there's a little bit. This is from the Facebook page, Halitics. By the way, join Halitics on Facebook if you haven't. So I just highlighted a couple of points which I find so frustrating. I've talked about this. But so one criticism of me, because I oppose to Harris and I support Stein, is that I'm allegedly making the perfect Stein the enemy of the good, Harris, thereby making it more likely the bad, Trump, will win. But what I find so extraordinarily frustrating about this argument is that I've never stopped saying Harris isn't good. She's bad. And I provide all the evidence over and over. Here's why she's bad. Because she promoted the Ukraine war because she's all in for the Israeli genocide. She refuses to take any, she's made it clear she's moved off the table. She's taken off the table any effort to hold Israel accountable. She says she's for fracking. She brags about making fracking more prevalent in our society when she was in vice president. She said she wouldn't do anything differently than Biden. So that means she would have greenlighted the Willow Creek carbon bomb. She would have supported, she would have pushed through the Mountain Valley Pipeline as part of the debt ceiling negotiations. So that's not good. None of that's good. Is it good? I said, Harris, the question, Harris is unwavering in her insistence she will continue supplying bullets to soldiers who are putting those bullets in the heads and chests of children. Is that what good people do? She's not good. That's the answer. I am not the enemy of good. I am the enemy of bad. Period. End of story in every way. All right, giving up on environmental reform. If I voted for Harris, I would be, yes. I don't find the argument that Harris-Biden don't deny the greenhouse gases are burning our planet up. I don't find that persuasive. Okay, so what? They're still making it worse. How is that an argument for them? Yeah, we know what we're doing is bad, as opposed to Trump. Yeah, I'm going to do the same thing, only I don't think it's bad. I don't see how one is less awful than the other. Or maybe they're both. Maybe it's worse to do the wrong thing when you know it's wrong. Although I'm sure Trump knows it's wrong too. All right, well, there it is. I got nothing else. I hope you have a great weekend. I'm sorry no one joined me. I want more. Of course, this is supposed. Tom Hartman would say his national town square or something. That's what this should be about, where everyone really is welcome. Unlike Hartman, I don't screen my calls. I don't curate. I don't make sure you agree with me before I put you on the air, or that you're not going to say something that will embarrass me. Which I think is pretty hard to embarrass me, actually, but. Guess some of you think you can. That's going to do it. I hope you all have a great weekend. There will be an Arlen Monday, I believe. Take care.